Today on Locked On Red Wings, we continue our 2024 player previews with Ville Husso, Joe Veleno, and Robby Fabbri.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast, while Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. On today's episode, guys, we're going to continue our breakdown of our player previews, rather, for the 2024 Detroit Red Wings season. We're going to talk about Ville Husso, Joe Veleno, and Robby Fabbri. Scotty, happy Monday. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right, man. Just watched two of the three most ridiculous baseball games I've ever watched from the Tigers over the weekend. But there's a huge fight in the baseball world, too. That was kind of exciting.
Was it Jose Ramirez?
Jose Ramirez and Tim Anderson.
Yeah, I got one of the guys.
Nice. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, literally the Tigers just lost 10-6 right before I'm here. So if I'm upset early on, it's because this team is inept. But, besides that, pretty good, though.
Well, and we're going to
pretty solid weekend.
We're certainly going to cheer you up by talking about two players who underperformed and one player who can't stay healthy. I'm sure. But let's get into that. Let's talk about leading off with Ville Husso. So we'll go in order of what is on the show sheet to the right of our faces. If you guys are watching on YouTube, first question, I'll just say it as it is on the today's show sheet. Can Ville Husso bounce back? What are our expectations of the guy we assume? Well, I mean, we think it's going to be a tandem, right? We don't think he's the bona fide starter. We think because of James Reimer's career history, what he's done with other teams, we think this is going to be like a 50-50 split, probably. But, can he be the 1A option, Ville Husso, that is? Can he bounce back and have a better year than he ended up finishing with last year? That's really the crux of the conversation when talking about this goaltender.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, can he bounce back? Yes. The thing that was, I don't know if frustrating is the right word, but certainly times it was definitely frustrating about Husso's season. It was like we saw glimpses and we saw flashes of like a really, really good goaltender. I mean, you want to talk about when we had Nolan on, like he said the same thing, and we used the same terminology as well. Throughout the first half of the season, there was a legitimate argument that he was literally the team's most valuable player. And like arguably, again, the sole reason that into December, this team was in a playoff spot, right? Like we talked about it a lot, like, if the season ended today, the Wings would be in the postseason. Like that was not single-handedly, but like that, there was a real argument that he was the most important person in that early season success. And then the second half, the wheels just completely fell off, right? And he just, struggled mightily, I guess would be the way to put it. And I think that part of the reason for that was because there was no legitimate number two goalie on the team. Like that's a lot of just like pressure, but B, that's a tough situation to put a dude in where it's like, hey man, like he was playing back-to-backs at one point in like January, not like early in the season. Like he was, January, February, this dude was starting back-to-backs at one point after they had just cleared up the 1B goalie situation. So like, I do think that just inherently having a backup, even if Reimer isn't like a 920 save percentage or anything, even if he's just holding down like a 900 or a 905 or something as a solid 1B, I think that's going to take a little bit of the pressure off of Husso, and I think indirectly that will help, or I guess directly that will help. But just as far as talent goes, like we've seen it. We've seen it. He got a little bit injured as well toward the end of the season. Like we saw a multiple month stretch where he was really, really good. And the only question is, can he stretch that out? We've seen him go over multiple month stretches where he's been really good. And it's just a matter of whether he has the ability to stretch that out over a full season. That's really the biggest and maybe even only question.
Yeah. And, that's kind of the gamble that the Red Wings, they did it with Nedeljkovic, and then they followed it up by doing it with Husso too, because Yzerman's trying to find a goaltender on the fly while Sebastian Costa develops. he's taking a gamble on guys who don't have a lot of games played that probably are playing in sheltered systems, which is that was the truth in Carolina and in St. Louis, who put up good numbers with those teams. So he took a gamble on guys that he hoped were the real deal, not giving up a ton to do so. Like, he didn't give up. I think he gave a third round pickup for Ville Husso. It wasn't like a ton. And Ville Husso in 40 games, half a season with St. Louis, had a 919 save percentage and a 256 goals against average. He comes here and, like you said, was on fire at the first half of the season. We saw that with Nedeljkovic too in his first year with the Detroit Red Wings, that the first half of his season was like he was lights out, but even to an extreme with Ville Husso, he was so lights out that first half of the year. But then again, eventually, as you put it, the grind of the year got to him because he's not in a sheltered system anymore. His goal saved above expected was amongst the best of the league because he had to play on his head to get this team wins. As you were saying, like, he was our MVP for the first half. And then the grind of a season, he played 56 games this last year, finished with an 8.96, and he ended up getting banged up. The season caught up with him. I think the workload caught up with him. He kind of just caved to the pressure and to the injuries. And I'm not too sure. I don't think the 919 save percentage is what Ville Husso is, but I don't think an 896 is what he is either. Yeah. I don't think the first half of last year is what he is, but I don't think the second half of last year is what he is either. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I think a good bounce back year from Ville Husso, especially behind a, marginally better defensive core. You changed out Robert Haig and Jordan Osterley for Justin Hall and Shane Gostisbehere, which, you can hate on the Justin Hall signing all you want, but that is an upgrade over Osterley and Haig. That's a better defensive core. And so he should have better support in the back end. He's going to have better offensive forward depth that'll help support him. Second year of a new system that isn't new to everyone anymore. I guess I shouldn't say second year of a new system, but second year of a system where all the players should understand what they're trying to accomplish. He should have a better safety net around him, and that'll be reflected in his play as well. He won't get as worn out. And then again, like you said, he won't get, he won't get driven into the ground by not having a backup. Because again, to your credit, I mean, he played so many extra games than he probably should have. And as much as in the first half of the season, we were saying, oh, he is the starter. Clearly, he wasn't quite ready for that because by the back half, he got wore out. He needs a safety net in terms of a backup as well. And I think James Reimer is going to provide that. He had a career worst year last year. I will recognize that, but he also played for the third worst hockey team in the NHL standings wise with the San Jose Sharks. So he's going to a better team. And James Reimer's career, he's never had a below 900 save percentage with the exception of last year. So despite his age, I think he'll bounce back, and we'll talk about that in his own episode as well. So I think all the extra pieces around Ville Husso will help alleviate some of the pressure for him to play his best hockey possible. So while I think he's not going to be the 919 save percentage we saw with St. Louis, I think if we get a 9.5, 9.10 save percentage goaltender, league average goaltender, that's perfectly fine because he's not meant to be the starter 1A or the starter. He's supposed to be a 1A or a 1B goalie for the Detroit Red Wings until hopefully Sebastian Cossa or Trey Augustine are ready for the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, if you go by month last season, October, he had a 926 save percentage. November, he had a 904. Obviously not a 926, but still really solid. December, a 901. Okay, still above 900. And then at that point, you're going into the new year. You're going into January 1st with him well over 900, right? January, 884. February, 913. So we bounced back in 10 games in February.
Did I pull that mute off?
What? Yeah, you did.
Okay, good.
In February with 10 games, 913. But then March and April were just so bad. March, he has an 867. And April, he has an 855. So, like, even if when you're looking at, the 896 to end the season, he had a save percentage over 900 in more months than he didn't. Like, it was just that March and April were so bad. If those are even 880s, which is, like, still not great, but if those are even like 880s or 885s, right? You're talking about a guy who's ending the season with, a save percentage pretty comfortably over 900. So I think it's not even necessarily like, oh, he needs to be able to be like what he was in October for a full season. He just needs to not go to the depths of his lowest points of this past season. He needs to not go a whole month with an 855 save percentage. If he can just keep that, you know, where his worst months, if you want to break it down into that standpoint, are like, you know, 890s or whatever. I think we're talking about a guy who can be a pretty solid NHL goalie.
And I don't think that the 56 games he played, you know, were necessarily, I don't think that's too much of an ask for your goalie if you're asking him to take the bulk of the workload either. But I think it's just how that 56 was bunched together is what drove him into the ground, because once it was established early in the season, he was alternating with the goalies, you know, Nedeljkovic and then Magnus Hellberg. But then once it became clear that neither of those guys were, let's face it, any good at the NHL level, it became game after game after game. He had a bad game, but they'd have to trot him back out there because his bad game was still better than what the other guys were giving him. So it's how those
better than anybody else's good games.
So if he's playing 56 games again this season, but it's spaced out a little bit more to give him a little bit more breathing room, and Reimer gives them just a modicum of decent goaltending, he'll be fine. I genuinely think Ville Husso is going to have a better year this year than he did last year. But again, I've been wrong before. Not to have the pessimist in me come out. We said the same thing about Nedeljkovic going into last season as well.
We certainly did.
And we parroted a lot of the same things: better defense, blah, 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 this and that. But I genuinely think this year is better than the year before, roster-wise. So I think we'll be fine on that front in the end.
Agreed.
Awesome. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Joe Veleno, the man without a contract. Well, I guess we'll talk a little bit about that too. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about AG1. This next partner is a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. You got to drink it every day. You got to give AG1 a try, because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement, like I said at the beginning, that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. Science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. AG1 helps you build your health foundation first. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com /NHL network. That's drinkag1.com /NHL network. Check it out. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are doing player previews for the upcoming NHL season. Since we're down to 3 days a week, if we do 3 players a day, this should roll us right into preseason. Scotty, we're going to now talk about Joe Veleno, the man without a contract. Let's talk about that first. One, Scotty, he is in arbitration. I think he's the only guy on the Red Wings roster who still does not have a contract. He's not arbitration eligible, so he's an RFA the Red Wings have complete control over. I mean, what's the deal? What do you think is holding up the contract for Joe Veleno?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's weird to be in August and we're still like, I mean, like he's gonna be here. He's gonna like like you said, he's an RFA with pretty much no leverage. Like I can't imagine that like we're gonna get some curveball at, you know, the 11th hour or something like that. But it's definitely weird, and I really don't have a great explanation for it. I guess, you know, RFA, the team has the leverage, but like they still have to agree to a number. Maybe they're just I don't know. Maybe they're just arguing over that number, and Veleno is maybe trying to take back some of the control in those negotiations. And
but he can't.
Like, you know, they don't get a deal. Okay, well then I'll, you know, kick you to the curb like I did Zadina. I really don't know. Like I'm not sure, but I do.
Joe Veleno's got a mean foot.
Like some big dramatic thing.
I mean, you said you don't really know, but I think you kind of answered it anyways. I think it's that it's completely up to the team, and because the team has full control, they're not in any rush to sign him to a contract. Yeah. I think because it's not like the arbitration is going to happen and they have to get an arbitrator in, and they both have to give numbers before the arbitrator talks. I think it's just because the team can sign him to a contract whenever they want. They're kind of just taking their time, and I don't expect him to make a lot of money. He's coming off his entry-level contract, I believe, which gave him a salary and AAV of wow, his AAV was over $1 million. I'm surprised by that, by an entry-level contract, but I wouldn't expect him to make much more than that, if anything, given off his performance, what we just saw. It might be a little bit of a prove it, but he had 81 games played, only missed 1 game all last season. I think it was early in the year too, when everybody was healthy to start the season.
Right.
He was a healthy scratch early in the season, if I'm recalling correctly, like Philip Zadina was too. And then, well, we don't have to talk about Zadina. He had 20 points, 9 goals, and 11 assists. Was technically a career high, 5 points higher than his 15 points in 66 games played last year. So he had, 15 games?
Played 15 more games and raised his point total by 5.
He was, let's say what it is. It was a little bit of a disappointing year for Joe Veleno. Somebody we were really excited for last year. He was doing really well with Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL, and we expected him to come up and hopefully be like a middle six center, but he ended up kind of settling, with the exception of when injuries happened, he kind of ended up settling in that fourth line center role. And, with the exception of a couple of flashes here and there of where he was like, it looked like he could be a decent playmaker, get in the corner, get the puck out, stuff like that. And never really showed much of anything. And a lot of nights he was kind of invisible out there. And, that also kind of happens with fourth line minutes. And I think it was the Locked On Flyers who asked us, like, is it a problem of him being stashed on the fourth line? But, he's getting stashed on the fourth line because it hasn't really shown that he deserves more minutes than that either. So
2 seasons ago for a month, he was getting first line minutes.
Yeah. And he looked okay given what the roster was.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I agree. Veleno is someone that I caught a little bit of heat back in like January for the first time we had really said on air, like, this is like not going like amazingly. I think we did like mid-season grades. And I think I was like really sour on Veleno just for the fact that you all laid out and the facts that, remained. He didn't like turn it around necessarily in the second half of the season. I still really like Joe Veleno. And I still think that there is a solid like bottom 6 forward in the NHL caliber of player within Joe Veleno. And I think that he can be a valuable player on a team. But you want to reference the Locked On Flyers conversation. I'll regurgitate the point I said on there. Like, there just isn't like a tool that right now he can like hang his hat on. And that's not a terrible thing. Like, if you're a jack of all trades, like, oh, I'm just like really solid at everything. That's obviously a very valuable and can be a really solid NHL player. But when you're trying to find something to separate you from the pack and like make yourself seen and like heard down on the fourth line, you kind of need like something to be able to hang your hat on. And I just like don't think he has it right now. He's not like gonna like, oh, okay, well, if everything else fails, at least Joe Veleno has what? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure I can answer that question. And again, if he's solid in everything, then he's going to be a solid NHL player. But we need to see steps in the right direction. And like you said, I mean, for having played 15 more games to only increase his point total by 5, I think is kind of the screaming thing there. I mean, yeah, hasn't had a 10-goal season yet, and this will be year 3. So
yeah, and I mean, the argument being like, and this is nobody have heard has like said this to me besides like the question they posed on Locked On Flyers about him being stashed in the fourth line, kind of preventing him from getting better. Like, yeah, his wingers probably aren't the best wingers in the world, but you would think if he was better than that, he would kind of light it up on the fourth line. Not say he could do it all, but you would see him outperforming the competition on that line. Like, because he would get, ideally, and it doesn't happen perfectly, that's how hockey rolls. The other team's trying to mismatch you, and you're trying to match them, and vice versa. But if he's going out there, he's presumably against their fourth line. And if he's against their fourth line and he's a really good hockey player, you would expect him to kind of light it up. And I don't think that I'm not giving up on Joe Veleno yet. He's only 23 years old. And this was just,
For sure.
I guess you could consider this his second full season. 66 games is, in 2022 is, a rookie season fully considered. Wow. A rookie season. I got to stop talking so fast. So I think with Joe Veleno, the ceiling is lower than I thought it was, but I'm not saying that he's like done or a bust. I mean, he was taken 31st overall, something like that, 30th overall. So I think that there is still
30.
A pathway there for him to be an everyday NHLer, but maybe our expectations for him are like third, fourth line instead of second, third line. And that's okay. We need those guys too. It's just, we got to understand that, his season high might be 30 points, that might be his best case scenario.
Let me put it to you this way. So we've talked about the 2 individual seasons. In his entire NHL career, he has played in 152 NHL games, and he has logged 36 points.
Yeah, it's not great.
Right? So, like, it's just again, like I, you know, not to repeat myself, but like I still do believe that there is a solid bottom six player there. But like, I mean, 36 points in 152 games to start off his NHL career is not, I don't think, injecting a ton of optimism into people. So just needs to, whether he like turns into, you know, oh, I'm going to shift toward being a playmaker and like setting my teammates up, or, oh, I'm going to, you know, like be a solid like 15 goals a season, like third or fourth liner like that. There's a place in that for the NHL forever. But like this kind of like, oh, you know, master of none fourth line role is just not leading to a lot of production at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a little bit of a step forward for him, like absolutely. But as far as what I would expect to be a successful step forward, like what does this have to be for a successful season for him? Like 25 points, another 5 points more, and just like be a little bit more, have your presence felt a little bit more on that bottom six. It's just, it's hard to tell because this is so much of a deeper team than before either. And I don't see a pathway for him to really, unless he really surprises us, I don't see a way for him to really elevate himself above comp.
No, I don't. Comp. I agree. I don't think he's going to be a top 3 line dude even at his best. But if he can go out there and put up like a 15-15 season, if he can go out there and get 30 points, 15 goals, 15 assists out of the fourth line and play in, you know, 70, 75 games, I mean, that would be, I think, a success. I think that would kind of get people back on the train and like, okay, this is a 24-year-old that on our fourth line just had a 15-goal, 30-point season like that. You know what I mean? I feel like that would be what it would have to take. I mean, if he 5 more points. So, I mean, if you do like the incremental, like, oh, it's 5 at a time thing, then he's sitting at 25 points. And we say that that's like 11 goals, 14 assists. Like, I'm not sure that's going to really like single-handedly shift a lot of people either. I guess, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is between that and a 15-15. Yeah. Like, I think that, yeah, like, and we might even be at a point where if he's not producing, you know, we're going to look at his games played at the end of April and be like, wow, this dude played in 50 games or something like that. You know what I mean? Like if it's 2 months without a ton of production like that, I mean, this is year 3 for him. This isn't like he's not a rookie anymore.
I agree. That's what it's going to come down to is we're going to need to see growth out of him, but just how much is, you know, what's up in the air. Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Robby Fabbri. The big question mark around him is his health. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are doing player previews. Let's talk about Robby Fabbri. This is a man who kind of similar to the Joe Veleno situation. Was a guy, a little bit of the Ville Husso in there too, with coming from St. Louis, getting sheltered minutes, hoping we could capitalize on, give him more minutes and see how he does. Guy with a lot of middle six potential, but just can't stay healthy. And, you know, given what the knee injuries are for Robby Fabbri, you can't really hold it against him because that's not, the injuries aren't his fault. But at the same time, availability is a skill set. It's a skill, and he has not had that availability. He's getting paid $4 million a year. When he did play last year, 16 points in 28 games played. That's pretty damn good. That's more points than Joe Veleno had in 81 games. With that being said, different players, different skill sets. So you can't compare that 1-to-1. But the year before that, in 56 games, he had 30 points. 18 points in 30 games played the year before. So he's pretty consistently slightly above a half point a game player. Doesn't play great defense, but in the offensive zone, he can create a lot of offense and score goals on the power play as well. Like Robby Fabbri, when he's on the ice, is a noticeable asset in the offensive zone. And he's a great winger for the middle six. But, I mean, Scotty, the big question mark is can we get a full season out of him?
I mean, yeah, certainly. That is definitely a big question. I mean, and that's like not something that's, I don't know, like predictable. Like this dude went out and it's not like it's the same exact like muscle or like leg or injury like every single time, right? Like he's going out there and he's switched ACLs, like it's, you know what I mean? Like it's not, I feel really bad for the dude. Like I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's just like it's really, really unfortunate. And so just when talking about like, can he play a full season? I'd have no idea. Like and again, like that's not if it was the same injury over and over again, I'd just be like, no, like point blank, probably not.
But it is pretty consistently his knees. Like his knees are consistently the problem. And
For sure.
that's one of those injuries, like, and I know modern medicine has come a long way, like ACL injuries. I mean, Robby Fabbri as an example, aren't clearly the end of the road. Like, he's come back and been an effective player until he injured it again. And I know this time last year, he didn't re-tear his ACL, but he did tweak it. And they were like, yeah, we're shutting him down just so he stays healthy. Like, how long? And again, it's almost unfair to ask this question, but it's becoming, it almost feels like it's a matter of when, not if, you know, how long into the season before he re-injures his knee. And it's, again, it feels unfair to even ask that question because he can't control that. He's not trying to hurt himself, but you can see it happen. Like when you see him tweak his knee or turn it the wrong way, and then he instantly reacts and he's gone. Well, and I feel horrible because he is a productive middle six winger. But if we get 82 games, he is an effective, important piece to the Red Wings middle six scoring. But we just can't get that availability from him.
Well, even just his entire NHL career, right? Like he's had a 7-year career. His rookie season, he played 72 games. Outside of that, it is consistently like 30 to 50. He had one season with 61. His age 24 season, he played in 61 games, but it's 72, 51, 32, 61, 30, 56, 28. Like that's, you know, like he has 2 seasons above 60 and none above and only one above 70. So like I think it's a very legitimate question, and it's just like it's really hard to answer. I mean, as far as his production goes, like you said, like he's a really valuable middle six forward on this team, and I think that Fabbri is kind of the poster child for like how this rebuild is going. Like if you're like, oh, you know, is this team headed in the right direction or not? Look at where Robby Fabbri is going to slot in the lineup on a nightly basis, and that will like answer that, because he is the guy who, you know, what is it, a few years ago now when we first signed him, or first, I guess, brought him in, first traded for him, he was a guy that was getting like top 6, and even, you know, when like injuries would happen, like first line minutes. And now this season, yes, injuries, all that, you know, we've already covered that. But this season, I think it's pretty likely that he's going to log legitimate time in the third line. Mm-hmm. And not that he won't get plenty of opportunity in the second line as well. But I think that that's just kind of like he's the perfect person to look at the progress, because he's moving lower and lower in the lineup, and not because he's just like unproductive.
And the thing too is, like, I think if he plays a full 82 game season, he probably logs 45 to 50 points, because like I said, in his career, he's been over a half point per game in the seasons he has played. The problem, again, I hate to beat the dead horse, those seasons aren't 82 games for him. Yeah. They're anywhere between 28 to 72, as you were saying. And it's never that full season. But when he does that, he's right there, over half point per game. And that is half point per game, guys, is for a middle six forward is really good production. Like that's really damn good production. And not Ville Husso, Robby Fabbri can bring that. He needs to stay healthy, and you can't control that. But like, if he stays healthy, guys, my prediction is if he plays full 82 games, he is gonna have 45 to 50 points, because that is what he's capable of. It'll be a 20 goal season with, you know, 30 assists or 25 assists, or maybe 25 goals and 20 assists. It'll be pretty even on that, because he's been pretty even on his distribution of points also. That's going to be vital. But the question, again, just ends up being, will he play the full 82? And that is a huge question mark.
He's never had a 20-goal season, but he's been on pace, if you prorate it, for a 20-goal season like almost every year of his career. So
people love when we prorate things.
Right. So it's just, yeah, I mean, that really is the biggest question. I know we're really talking about the injury thing a lot, but yeah, I mean, as far as like what he brings on the ice, I mean, you nailed it. That's really, really like the potential for really solid production out of a middle six forward, and a solid goal scorer. And I mean, we see him kind of not be afraid in front of the net either, which is something that I think this team still could use help in. So I guess, to put it lightly. So I think not that he's going to be some like dynamic force out there, but, you know, not having, we saw him when he was healthy back, especially in, I want to say it was the year we traded for him. Like he was kind of a menace at times too. So yeah, I mean, I'm
motivated
really
for sure.
It's just like every offseason, I'm really pumped for Robby Fabbri, and then it's just a matter of how quickly that ends up changing. So here's to hoping that, knock on wood, that isn't the case this year, and he can go out and play 70 plus.
Yeah, I mean, I know we keep beating the dead horse that is, his injury history and his health, but it's like I said at the beginning of the segment, is availability is a skill, and that is something that he has unfortunately not had. And again, reiterate, it's not his fault, not something he can control, but if he is available, he's a vital part of this team's offense. So that about does it. I mean, let's see. Husso, we think he can bounce back. We think he'll meet somewhere in the middle between his St. Louis days and last year. Veleno, we think he's kind of in his role, and we hope for a slight step forward. And then Fabbri, we just hope can stay healthy.
Pretty much.
All right. That'll about do it for this episode. We'll be back on Wednesday with a new episode. We should have a crossover for you guys if everything goes well, but if not, we'll do another player preview. You'll find out when the episode's posted, so stay tuned to that. Scotty, final thoughts?
We ball.
We're back with a new episode on Wednesday, same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.